Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. I have another interview for you today from a veteran homeschooler, Dawn, who coincidentally started homeschooling her family the same year we did, and extra coincidence, which was a surprise to me, they also used the Charlotte Mason approach. So today we're able to go a little bit deeper into exploring what the Charlotte Mason approach can be, because we both understood what each other was talking about. So for those of you who are practicing it or who are encouraged or want to know a little bit more about it, this is going to be especially helpful for you today. I do so enjoy hearing other homeschoolers' stories. Everybody has got a different one to tell, and no matter how ordinary we all feel we are, we're not. And we can learn so much from listening to other people. I do hope you enjoy listening to Dawn. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you so much for joining us today, because I just know that there's going to be homeschooling mums and families out there who will really appreciate your experience and your wisdom. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's get started then, Dawn. As you reflect back over the years when you were homeschooling your family, perhaps you could just let us know how long ago you started homeschooling and how many children you homeschooled. Just this kind of that general idea of a calendar, if you like.
Right. Well, we homeschooled all three of the children at various times. Perhaps my experiences are not typical. I don't really know, but we had three kids in, at one point, three different schools, and the next to youngest one was not being challenged, and his school was very far away, and we just got to thinking, this doesn't make sense. He's not learning a thing. He's been doing the same worksheets that his teacher's been handing him for years. He hasn't grown any at all. And why is he even in school? So we started with him. That was the middle child. And then we brought the oldest child, my daughter, home, and the little one just came along for the ride because he was I want to say, let's see, the middle one was second grade when we started homeschooling. So that meant the older one was fifth grade, and the little one was 6 years younger than the middle one. So that he was a 2 or something. I can't remember exactly. So I guess you don't really homeschool a 2-year-old, but he sure learned a lot listening to his brother and his sister.
Yes.
And we had probably, at the beginning, we probably had these great ideas of, I'm going to homeschool and my children will learn all these things, and they'll be happier for it because they won't be sitting in a classroom not learning anything. And I think that's how it really did go. They really did learn a lot. They loved being home, and I loved having them home. I can remember before we started homeschooling, missing my kids at the end of summer when it was time to start school. That told me right there, what's going on? Why it was a strange feeling, because I heard so many of my friends say, oh, thank goodness school is starting. I have to get the kids out of the house. And I kept thinking, oh no, school's starting and I'm going to miss my kids. So, so we started homeschooling for, I guess you would call it, academic reasons. I had taught all three of my kids to read before they ever would have started school. And they had really great sponges for minds. They were really, really smart, and they were able to just absorb so many things. And they were pretty bored in school, I would say.
Yeah, sound like you were just born to homeschool, Dawn.
I love to teach. I never got a teaching certification. I always wanted to, but kind of ended up taking a different path and went into business. I started out as an education major, and I let people talk me out of it. But I think I'm glad now, because if I'd been in the public schools teaching, maybe I wouldn't have seen how important homeschooling could have been for our particular family.
Okay. Yeah. So how long ago did you start to homeschool then? I just was going to think about what curriculum you were using and what was available at the time.
Yeah. So this is, let's see. My son was born in 90, so that means we started homeschooling in 1997. That sounds like back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. We certainly did not have what homeschoolers today have. We didn't have all of the internet. We did have a homeschooling conference, and it was once a year. It was just a marvelous way to look at all the different curriculum, all the different books you could read, all the different ideas for how to homeschool or what to do. And they also had classes. So you could learn about, learning abilities of children, or how to teach your kids through music, for instance, or something like that. There was all kinds of different classes, and I really enjoyed that. And that's how we got to know other people in our communities back then, before we had all the internet and everything. And we didn't really know, how to find other homeschoolers, because it was less popular than it is now. Right. And it was really a lot of fun to go to that conference, and people would bring their kids, and we'd make a day of it, or sometimes stay overnight. And it was great fun. We used a lot of different curriculum. My kids, all three of them, loved to read, and they easily could learn things from reading. I found that out probably after we started homeschooling, because you get to know your kids really, really well when you start homeschooling them, because you're with them all the time, right? And I guess you would say it was loosely based on the Charlotte Mason method. Lots of really good books. We learned, for instance, about other countries and customs from other countries, just from reading books, just from reading novels. And they loved it. They all just lapped it up. And we would do, some of them were read alouds, and some of them they had to read for themselves. And they had a marvelous time with that.
Give me a quick example of some of the books that you read that were very good books, because Charlotte Mason ones usually are, that opened your children's eyes. Just give me some examples.
Oh, goodness. Wow.
Sorry.
I need to get back to you on that one, because actually I'm in my sunroom right now, and I do have some books in we just moved in April. So in one of the boxes that I haven't unpacked and put on the shelf yet are some novels, but I can't tell you specific titles right now, but I can tell you one of them was about the cranes in Japan, maybe. Oh, if I could think of the title, you would know the book I'm talking about. We definitely learned about the Holocaust and the war in Germany from some of the famous books that that everybody reads, but a lot of them were a little bit more obscure books that other people might not have known about had they not been on a list that I was given that said Charlotte Mason, suggested or whatever books. Golly.
The titles of the books then probably Absolutely. If you come across them later, that would be a wonderful resource, because I do like collecting lists of books to pass on. But it isn't so much the title of the book, but it's the kind of things that those books taught your children. So that was probably more my motive in asking you about them, because it's the exposure they get outside of well, for you in the States. So you've just mentioned they learned something about Japan and cranes, and then they were looking at Germany and the war and the Holocaust. And that's the kind of thing I had in mind for.
Yeah. And gosh, it was a lot of books based on children's experiences or stories about children that live in other countries, all over the world.
Yeah, great books, and they're an education in themselves, right?
And I learned so much.
Yes.
And I don't know if people, when they start out homeschooling, think that they are going to be the ones learning. I learned about so many different subjects, and I learned so much about my own children. It was just eye-opening. And of course, I love to learn too. So there's that.
I know what you mean, Dawn. I had no idea of that extra bonus and blessing that would come about. I learned so much. I'm a completely different person, I feel, as a result of homeschooling than what I would have been if I had just stayed the normal prescribed social course that, we assumed we probably would. And I am so grateful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I am so grateful and humbled. And now, of course, my kids are grown. They're, 36, 33, and 27. And they are having kids of their own and talking about, schooling and education and stuff for them. And I keep kind of reminding them, well, you could always homeschool, because they did have a good experience. I think if you ask them, I think they would say they had a good experience. They were not, I should be clear, they were not homeschooled their whole lives. So we pulled them out at different times for different grades. And the oldest one actually surprised me and said she wanted to go. I think she was a sophomore, and she said, I'd like to go back to school because I feel like all my friends are having these experiences in high school that I should have. She wanted to go to dances, and she wanted to be on, different committees and that sort of thing at school, and change classes and all that. And I said, well, if that's what you want to do, we'll go talk to the counselor, and, you can enroll in school. And I thought, I don't know how this is going to go. Well, you'd have to ask her how it went. But from my point of view, I specifically remember her going to her first dance and coming home and saying, Mom, that was not a good experience. I don't know what I was thinking. The kids are all just like lewd and dancing inappropriately. And she said, my friends and I left after not very long at all, and we're not going to go to any more dances.
But, the important thing there was that you gave her the freedom to want to go and just check that, because I think the grass always seems greener on the other side, no matter what you're actually doing, doesn't it? And,
sure.
Yeah.
The grass is greener on the other side when you're not homeschooling.
Yes.
And when you are homeschooling. So the lesson there is maybe to be happy where we are.
All right. Yeah. So what was I going to ask out of that one? I was also just going to say that we also started homeschooling in 97.
Oh.
Yeah. And definitely there was no internet. Everything was books. Your community was just what you had around. We did have some conferences, like you said yourself. So your conferences, were they annual events or several a year? How did they work?
No, it was, to my recollection, it was only once a year. So you had to get everything you needed. And I want to say it was in the spring. And a lot of people start schooling in the fall, like the traditional public schools do. And you had to get everything you thought you needed for the whole year, the whole next year, at that conference, or at least get an idea of what you needed so that you could then send away. This sounds just, oh, like dinosaurs. Send away for the books and
Yeah.
have them shipped to you. We did have something really wonderful in a little homeschool reseller storefront in our town. We lived in Raleigh at the time, and she had, you could drop off your books, or you could sell your books, or she would sell them for you. And you could go in there and take a look at stuff. You could go in and see that, what types of curriculum there were and whether you might like it, just opening the books and flipping through them. And then you could buy whatever she had.
Hmm.
And that was kind of nice. I guess that's not necessary nowadays. We can buy used books online.
Yes, it's a different world, all right. So I'm just kind of establishing the why of your homeschooling. You've already mentioned that it was mainly academic reasons that you decided to bring your children home. So when you thought were thinking ahead and planning for what you thought homeschool might look like, what was important to you at the time? What did you strategically put into place? And then just rippling out for that, what actually changed with what you thought was important that maybe wasn't as important as you thought it was, and what became important as you moved on, especially in those early years?
Good question. I think it's a different answer for each child.
Uh-huh.
I think what I thought was important with my middle child, my son, was that he was not bored, and that he was not just sitting around doing worksheets all day, every day. And I thought he needs to be challenged. He needs to learn something every single day. He needs to learn new things. He doesn't need repetitiveness. And so when we started, I discovered he, like most children, likes a little bit of repetitiveness. And that humbled me a bit. With my daughter, and I guess with my son, I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask him his experience. I think for him, I wanted him to find a love of reading, because I knew he liked to read, but he didn't read during school. He didn't read. He kind of balked at assigned reading from school. And so I felt like if we could get him home and challenge him and give him interesting things to read, then maybe he would find that love of reading. And he did. Fast forward to now, he probably only reads technical manuals. He's in IT, so I doubt he reads for pleasure anymore. But and then with my daughter, she actually wanted to come home because she didn't like the social things that were going on. She was in, I think it was 5th grade. She went all the way from kindergarten all the way through 4th or 5th grade. And then she said, I don't like this. I don't want to be here. She was complaining because the kids were doing things that she wasn't allowed to do, and it wasn't appropriate for her age to do. But some people allow their kids to do things you don't think they should. And she also had a group of friends that suddenly shunned her. They said, you can't sit with us at lunch anymore because you don't have a boyfriend.
Oh, gosh.
I think she was 11. So we brought her home for a very different reason. She was very bright, is very bright, and she needed a challenge, definitely. She was in a good school at that point, but when she came home, we didn't have any of the social issues because a lot of the homeschoolers were normal 11-year-old girls who liked to play and didn't need boys in their lives yet, you know. So that kind of worked out pretty well. I wasn't surprised that what we brought her home for, you know, was the same or worked out for her anyway.
Right.
But we did have challenges for her academically, and we had some really great experiences that, I mean, we did bring her home for academic reasons as well. But we found some really, through our homeschool support group, we found some really great people who were willing to teach the kids in our homeschool support group and challenge them in a lot of really great ways. We had a college literature professor who was willing to teach middle school and high school American Lit. I think it was American Lit and British Lit. I can't remember now for sure. My daughter might remember, but and they were very challenged because she was a college professor. We had a biologist who was willing to teach academically gifted biology. So we had some really great people, surrounded ourselves with really great people that were able to challenge the kids.
It's a wonderful privilege, really, when you can find oh gosh, do you find yourself avoiding the word expert now after everything that happened in the last few years? So experted out.
Yes.
So I'm just thinking of your college professors, because they are so much genuine experts in their field. So to be able to obtain someone like that who gets the picture of why you're homeschooling was that's an enormous bonus, if you like. And did you find then that as a result of them doing quite a challenging level of American and English Lit and the biology, that either encouraged them that, oh, I'd really like to go further down this field, or gave them enough exposure to go, that was really interesting, but it's not really for me?
A little bit of both. Yeah. I think with every experience that the kids had and that we brought to them, they had the freedom to say, I want to learn more about this. Or they had the freedom to say, yeah, I've taken the minimum and that really doesn't thrill me, and I'm glad that I don't have to do anymore.
Right.
So
Yeah.
both sides, you know, it's marvelous that you have that opportunity to say, hey, you know, you really love literature. Why don't you spend the next 3 weeks or 6 weeks or however you want learning more about it and see if that's something you want, a path you want to go down.
Because that's the freedom that doing something, especially like a Charlotte Mason approach, affords you. You can stop here and recognize, oh, this is actually a wonderful opportunity, because as we both would know, one of Charlotte Mason's well-known quotes was that you would learn a little about a lot and a lot about a little. I realize that's probably, you know, slightly tweaked from what she would have actually said. And also, one of my favorite quotes is that the world is your classroom. And I love that about the approach. Can you tell me why you chose the Charlotte Mason approach and how you implemented it to suit the needs of your family?
That's a very good question. I don't recall the specifics of why we chose that. I just know that it felt like a very good fit once I learned about it. I think I had taken a class at our homeschool conference by one of the other moms. I mean, that's what a lot of the teachers were just other mothers. And she had just explained how she kind of did things in her own home, and it just sounded like such a great idea for my reading loving kids. So how we implemented it, we kind of picked different things at different times depending on what else was going on. So if we had Like when my daughter was learning algebra, she was in middle school and she wanted to learn algebra, and it was very age appropriate for her personally, not for every kid, but and I'm not a math person. So her dad is a math person. She ended up actually teaching herself with just a little help from dad. She taught herself both algebra and geometry, but the algebra was very intense. And so we kind of backed off a little bit. And that's the beauty of homeschooling and the beauty of the Charlotte Mason method is if you've got the time and you really want to do a lot with it, you can. And if you're very heavily into algebra right now, and for a kid that is a little bit bright and they really want to go down a path, sometimes they really get into something and they pick their head up and it's 3 days later, because they've just really enjoyed it. And she was that way with some of her subjects. So how we implemented was different with different kids. I do remember we really enjoyed Charlotte Mason did a lot of drawing and sketching, and so we had a sketchbook. Each of the kids had a sketchbook, and we would do some sketch every single day that we could. I mean, I was not very strict about you have to sit in a classroom in my house and do XYZ for a certain number of minutes or whatever. But we did enjoy going outdoors. I can remember the day that my son said something like, "Mom, all the trees have different green in their leaves. It's not all the same green." And I thought, he's getting it. But it takes observation. And that's something that sometimes kids don't have time for. They aren't able to just sit, look around, enjoy nature, enjoy the beauty of it. So I do remember that part of it. I'm sorry I remember everything. It's been a long time.
I know things come up and I'm suddenly thinking, I remember going through this. It was like a wake up moment that I learned that. Remember, she talks about just what's it called? Not mindfulness. Darn, the expression's gone. Where you just allow the child to be.
Yeah,
something in activity. It'll come to me. It's just, again, like you, I've forgotten the term, but it's sitting there. It'll bubble up. Whereby it is a valid and really important educational project, if you like, to just let the child be, stop organizing them. Yes, it's something in activity, and it's actually really strategic. But unless you give the child that opportunity and the time to use their imagination and burrow down and let their brain think about and produce their own ideas, that was part of Charlotte Mason's philosophy, is teaching your child how to think.
Absolutely.
To think, not what to think. And that was a major pivot in life, because that's not the way our society does things. And to relearn how to do that was absolutely pivotal for us.
Yeah, and the public schools don't want that either. They want to fill that little bucket up with as much stuff as they can, knowledge, just stick it all in there. And but if you can, as the expression goes, you don't want to fill a bucket, you want to light a fire under these kids. And if you can teach them how to think and give them some critical thinking skills, they'll never stop. They'll never stop learning. They'll never want to stop learning.
Yes, it never ends. Education doesn't finish the day you graduate or finish your high school or university. So for families who are currently pursuing the Charlotte Mason, or maybe a mix of, or who might want to consider it, as you look back over your years, because hindsight's always quite clear, isn't it? And I know I've got things that I would say, if I could go back and do this all over again with Charlotte Mason way, what would I change? How would you encourage the new parents who are, adopting Charlotte Mason? What would you say to them?
relax. I, I think a lot of times we think we have to do everything a certain way, that everything has to look the same, or sometimes we compare ourselves to other people and they may be doing something differently than we are, and we start to get a little anxious or uptight about, I'm not doing it right, or I'm not doing it the same way as everybody else. And I certainly don't think Charlotte Mason would want us to be anxious about the very natural ability of learning and teaching your children, right? So I think relaxing. Every day doesn't look the same. You know, in the public schools, kids oftentimes have very similar days. They go in, they sit down, they always do their alphabet first, or they always do their whatever first. And when you're homeschooling, maybe for all different methods of homeschooling, but especially for us when we were doing it, every day didn't look the same. Every day was a new, different kind of day, and we didn't structure it, and we followed some paths sometimes that just took us down a little rabbit hole. And sometimes it would find us, we would have a conversation about something, and suddenly I would say, oh, there's a book about that. And off we would go to the library. And I think Charlotte Mason would approve.
Yes, I agree.
But if you are a very structured person and you feel like you need to sit at little desks in a room in your house and always do math first, and then always follow that with, reading, and then with writing, the Charlotte Mason method, I think, gets you out of that structure a little bit, gives you so many wonderful things to think about and wonderful books to read.
How then did adopting a lifestyle that for most other people wasn't what they would do, and you're obviously, when you're making big decisions like this for your children, because they are countercultural almost, aren't they, choosing to homeschool?
Oh, back then they sure were.
Yeah. How did you reassure yourself that you weren't going to stuff things up, that you weren't going to ruin your children? And how was this going to prepare them for what we know isn't like the real world? They are in the real world, but how did you kind of look down the years and go, okay, we're preparing you for this, and yet we're doing it in a contrarian way? Have you got any thoughts on that, Dawn?
Well, before we started homeschooling, I had a lot of those thoughts, and I almost didn't homeschool because I didn't want to push the start button. I was so afraid I would not do it right. And I think finally starting and realizing that my kids were natural learners, if you just kind of got to know them a little bit, kind of helped a little bit. It helps to have a support group around you with kids that are older than yours. That helps a lot. I had friends in a church support group that were, their kids were, I want to say mid to late teens when my kids were much younger. And I saw that their kids were wonderful kids. They were polite and friendly and smart and interesting. And then we started hearing stories about people, getting accepted to college. Oh, well, look at that. They didn't screw up. So if they didn't screw up, I guess I can make it okay. Yeah. And I did. And all three of my kids all went into wonderful careers. I'm very, very proud of all three of them. They're amazing, smart, fun, interesting people. And I kind of wish I'd had a little bit of a crystal ball to see that, back then. But having those older children in other families in our support group helped a lot. Perhaps nowadays people could read anecdotal stories or testimonies from from children on the internet. Back then we didn't have it, but I'm sure there's lots of that out there. Probably on your podcast.
Indeed. I have interviewed some adult homeschoolers, and that's really interesting to hear their reflections and experiences. So just going back to your children, did you put them back into public school to finish their education, or did they go, did you homeschool right to the end of their, how did that?
No, I did not homeschool right to the end. My daughter wanted to go back to school as a junior, I want to say, and she really could have graduated within a semester or two because she had everything she needed, all the classes that she needed, but she didn't want to go to college right away, so young. She would have been only 15 or 16. So the middle one, I think he went into school in around 7th grade. And then the little one went to school right away. I mean, I think we only homeschooled 2 or 3 years, and then he started school. Mm-hmm. So he's the one that probably has the most public school experience, but I still think I gave him a really good start.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He had that love of learning before he started school.
Yes. And I think it's also important to point out and to reassure everybody who homeschools, because I noticed you used the word earlier on, typical. Maybe we weren't a typical homeschooling family, and I thought, there is no typical. I think what is typical is that it's untypical. There is no right way to homeschool. People dip in and out. Some people are lifelong in it. There's no right and proper way. And I think it's easy to feel that maybe one didn't, we weren't as good or committed as another family because they did X, Y, and Z. And I don't, that's just not true, because each family does what's right for them before God at the time. And any measuring stick that we hold up is our own and our own self-doubts. So there you go. It's there is no one right way, and that's one of the things I like to say to people, because there's enough self-doubt and anxiety going on as there is. Because when you take the children's education on yourself, you haven't delegated, have you? So you're always questioning and worrying, and like when you said before, what would you say to the mums? Just relax. I needed someone to tell me that in my early years.
Yes, I did too. It's not rocket science. It's not the leader of the free world. It's your own children, and it's okay. And you know what? Even if we did put our children in school and didn't homeschool them, we would still make mistakes. So why do we think it would be such a terrible thing if we made a mistake when we were homeschooling?
Yeah.
I think we're so hard on ourselves.
That is one thing we're really, really good at, and I think it also helps us deal with that ourselves. It's like one of our human weaknesses that we're always concerned about, what we're doing to our children, and just to forgive ourselves, take the opportunity to learn and become better at whatever it is ourselves. Or because we're both Christian, we know that that part of what we do is that we're trying to become more Christ-like. So this time next year, I should be a slightly improved version, as Jordan Peterson would say, of Christine. A Christian says that this time next year, I should be a little bit more Christ-like than what I am this year. And I think that's what those opportunities also give us the chance to do.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Charlotte Mason, as we know, was very big on learning life skills, not just book work, and she often took us all out into the big wide world and taking opportunities. What skills were important for you to pass on to your children? And what do you wish you would have made sure they learned or had the opportunity to?
Well, I am a homemaker first. Um, and I wanted them to learn cooking, and I wanted them to learn how to keep things tidy. I felt that those life skills of, living at home and taking care of yourself and taking care of your food needs and keeping your home nice and neat were really important. And I love cooking, so it wasn't hard to jump into that with my kids. And we made it so much more fun because we threw in a little math here and there. When you're baking a cookie and you want to double the recipe and you need 2.5 cups, now how many cups do you need? And how many quarters cups is that in 2.5 cups? And all kinds of marvelous fun things. And so we did lots and lots of cooking. And all three of them like to cook now. Well, the oldest and the youngest like to cook. My middle one, he probably likes to eat, so he cooks. But he may not love cooking as much. But at the time, he absolutely loved it. They had a lot of chores, age-appropriate chores, but probably a lot more chores than other children their age. Because I felt that it was very important to teach them that they needed to have a strong work ethic and that they needed to keep their room, their house, their lives neat and tidy. It was very important to me, and I believe that probably that was instilled by my mom. So I felt like that was important to instill in them.
Mm. See, that's a kind of an act of faith, really, because you're just believing that if you do this, then they will such and such. So now looking back, you've said your children are in their 30s. Can you see evidence that what you hoped them to learn back then with those, excuse me, chores, that has paid dividends into their lives as adults?
Absolutely. They are all three very hard workers. They're all three very conscientious. They're very successful. I can't say that all three of them are super neat and tidy. One in particular comes to mind, but I won't name names. but generally speaking, they're very successful people. And of course, I'm the bragging mom. I hope that their bosses all think they're successful and that their spouses think that they're hardworking, and I don't know. You'd have to ask them, I guess. But I really do see that many of the things that we did when we were homeschooling and when I had the kids home with me were showed up later. And sometimes, when you homeschool your kids, or even when you're just teaching your kids something, you don't know if it went in. You blabber on, bup, 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 and you think, are they listening to me? Did they hear what I said? I gave them really good advice. Is it in there? And sure enough, it is. It comes out. It just doesn't always come out that same day. It might come out, years later. I'm sure you found that too.
Oh, yes. We do worry so, don't we? But I sometimes think of the principle of gardening. I mean, it's not that I'm a very good gardener, but I kind of understand the principles. A garden doesn't grow by itself. If you're going to grow a beautiful garden or a productive vegetable garden, it takes work. You have to dig it. You've got to lay compost. You've got to weed. You've got to plant at the right time of the year. And then you get this harvest. And I think the principles like that are universal. So when you adopt that in your own family life, that's what I mean. It's kind of like an act of faith. You successful children, like you just said, that didn't happen by accident.
And it didn't happen quickly. It happens over time with lots of practice.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of moms saying, did you make your bed today? But when you brought up gardening, I got to thinking, that is one thing that my mother and I both had a love of gardening, and that is something I did not really instill in my children. I should have, I could have, I wish I had, because that's something that they can, that you, even if you don't like flowers, you can grow your own vegetables. And it's very relaxing, and it's a good hobby, a healthy hobby to be outdoors. And I don't know what I was thinking. Why didn't I teach them that? Oh, well, I can always teach them now.
And they can still learn themselves because you equip them to do that.
Sure. Yeah. And they love to learn. So if they wanted to, maybe they never wanted to.
Well, you can't.
And I'm not a terrific gardener either. I poke around at it and I enjoy it. But
and I think that's also a principle too, is that you can't teach them everything. It's just impossible, because once over lightly of everything is just going to be shallow. So again, going back to the Charlotte Mason principle, a little about a lot and a lot about a little, where they know a lot about some, and then they're equipped, because now you've taught them how to think. They can go and learn to garden if they want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we learned about that I thought would be really interesting, they learned and they said, yeah, okay. And they were done, and they've never revisited it. I remember specifically a module on birds. And we were fascinated, and we all wanted to learn, how do they fly? I think it started with my middle child, or maybe my youngest one, saying, how can birds fly? It doesn't make sense. And so we got this stuff, and we sent off for it, I think, and it came in a box, and there was some bird feathers and instructions to spin around and hold your hand out and with the feather in your hand, and you would feel it as you spun faster and faster that the feather lifted your hand up, and sure enough it did. And then we were done, and we've never revisited it again. But what they learned was, you can try out things, and you can get tangible things and learn about it if you want to. I don't know. In school, would they have just read a book about it? Probably. I don't know.
Oh, and worksheets and fill in the blanks. And
yes, lots of fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
That just makes me grumpy.
Oh dear. Can you offer any I'm just thinking about tips to make a homeschooler's life, especially a homeschooler's mum's life, just run a little bit more smoothly? Because I do remember some days could feel quite chaotic, and you were running to catch up with yourself. Is there anything, looking back, that you would recommend? I could have done this better, or if I could have implemented this habit and I did this and it was really helpful. What advice have you got, especially for people whose organization doesn't come naturally? They're not born organized.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I think is kind of universal, it's not just for homeschoolers, but I think when you homeschool, some of this comes to the surface, is if your children don't, well, I would call it obey, but maybe it's just don't do what you say. If they're not willing to be obedient children, you're going to have a hard time of it. So if you're thinking about homeschooling, now would be a good time to work on getting your kids to do what you say and follow directions that you've given them. Even a kindergartner, even a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, especially a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, needs to have that skill, and you need to have some consistency with that, because other things fall into place once you have the consistency of, is there a better word? I'm calling it obedience, compliance, maybe. Do you get what I'm saying?
Oh gosh, yes. yeah, I'm thinking about, is it, my face has gone serious, I realize that, but I was thinking about what we were doing with our children, but I'm also thinking that how regularly I'm seeing it now, that parents just don't have any control over their children. And I'm looking at them thinking, if you put 5 years, 10 years on that, what have you got? And if they don't know how to respond to your parental authority, how are they going to respond to other authority when they're older and then they're adults? It's just,
They're going to be very resentful, and they're probably going to have issues with authority and having trouble holding down a job and things like that. Is my guess.
Yes, yes. So yeah, I'm with you on that consistency. I don't have an issue with the word of obedience. I think it's probably it's had bad press because it's often connected with overly strict parenting, lack of compassion and love, and I think that's just the opposite. No, if you love your children, you will teach them to obey, and you will teach them that there are consequences in life. And
absolutely, yeah. I think that's really a very basic building block of a lot of other things in your family with your children. Is that compliance, that obedience, that willingness to do what mom or dad ask you to do. And then from there, you can always ask for help. I think that's something that sometimes homeschoolers think, well, I should have it all together and I should know what I'm doing. No, you're learning just right along with your kids. You don't have it all together. You're figuring it out as you go, and it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to admit, I'm a little confused here. I'm having a little trouble here, or I don't know how to do, I don't know how to be organized, or I don't know how to structure our day, or I am having trouble, doing two things at once. I mean, you can always ask other homeschoolers for help. And surely there's somebody in one of your homeschool support groups or in your neighborhood that has an answer for you.
People are willing to help if you just ask. I would suggest, though, to you'd be familiar with that verse that says, don't cast your pearls before swine, which sounds like that's a really dramatic thing to say. But really, one of the things that it's saying is just be really wise about who you talk to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. You have to have, you have to surround yourself with a support structure of people who are like-minded, that have the same morals that you do, and have a good understanding of what you're doing. And just because somebody has homeschooled their kid doesn't mean that they're on the same page with you, right? But you do have to be willing to find some people that can give you some ideas on certain different things. I don't know how to teach somebody how to be organized. I am super organized, probably to a fault. I'm the weirdo that cleans our house every week, and I have the spoons all lined up in the drawer. I don't know how to teach that. It's just, that's what I do. So if someone were to ask me, well, you're very organized, how do I get myself organized? I'm not sure.
That's okay. That's right. I would send them straight to the fly lady.
The fly lady.
And I'm pretty sure she came from down in your area. She taught me pretty much everything I need to know about organization, because I'm one of these, I'm not a born organized person. Everything I know I had to learn. And the fly, you should look her up, flylady.net. She's been around for quite some time, and she would be doing what comes naturally to you. She helps you organize, like, every day, what you do in that day, seasonally, and it was a wonderful gift to me. And you just adopt. Yeah, you'll find the story. She calls herself a fly lady because in an earlier time in her life she taught fly fishing. That's how she gets the acronym there. But so that's what I do. If somebody doesn't know, go and see flylady.net. She'll tell you everything you need to know.
This is the first I've heard of this.
Oh dear. Okay, so that's a couple of things that you've got for us to help a homeschooling life run more smoothly. Anything else that you could give some advice on having a smoother house than what you...
I am a planner, and I was, I've always been a planner. I was planning out, not that you have to follow every plan, but if you have a plan, it makes life easier when you're homeschooling. If you have an idea of, for instance, I used to keep a piece of paper on the fridge with meals that I had ingredients for. So when we were done with whatever we were doing, outside sketching or playing on the playground or going to a homeschool support group or math, whatever it was that we were doing, when we were done, I had a good idea of what I was going to make for dinner that night so that I could take care of the family that way. Planning chores, every Saturday, do XYZ, keep your house nice and neat or whatever, that sort of thing. I think planning is probably my best friend. But I can't say for other people. I think they have to, unfortunately, people don't want to hear this, but I think you have to find your own way. You have to make your own way through, navigate through this. Because if you start out saying, okay, I'm going to be organized, I'm going to plan, we're going to do school every morning at 9 a.m., and then something happens and somebody gets sick and you don't do that, and you're a real rule follower, then you might think, well, I'm done. I'm done for. This isn't working. And that's not the case at all. You have to also, in addition to planning, be flexible. That's probably really hard.
Yeah, but it is one of those vital character traits as opposed to personality, because by personality I'm not organized, by personality you are organized, but as building my character, that is just something I can improve on and build that part of it. And I think flexibility is a major one, because especially with kids, things happen. And so if things do get messed up with illness or some other event, or an opportunity comes to town or something like that, if you don't have that measure of flexibility, it's just going to bring such major stress unnecessarily. So that is a character thing to work on, I feel, if you struggle with flexibility.
Yes, I would say so. Yeah. And I do struggle with flexibility. I will say that I probably am more flexible now after our homeschooling experience than I was before we started. You learn along the way.
Yes. Because on the flip side, people like me who aren't organized by nature can often use, but I'm so flexible, as a means of justifying our chaos or lack of organization. So there's weaknesses at both ends of that spectrum. And I shouldn't use my ability to be flexible as a justification for downright laziness or just an unwillingness to want to put a plan into place. So there's always that balance that we have to try and figure it out.
Yeah, balance is a really good word. I think that's the word of the day for homeschoolers, is balance. Because you also have to remember, some people may homeschool only one kid at a time, or have kids in school and kids at home, or they may have all of them at home. I mean, there's just so many different ways that homeschooling can look. And if you have a balance in your life, and if you have a sense of, I can be flexible, but sometimes I can be a planner, and I can do this because I don't have these high expectations of myself, then I think everything goes much more smoothly.
Dawn, when you were reading through the questions that I sent you just to have a think about, was there anything in there that you thought, I'd like to talk about that quite a bit? Or is there anything that kind of jumped out as a result of those questions and now you would like to talk about it, even though I haven't asked you?
The only thing that we haven't already talked about, I think, is well, we touched on it just a tiny bit, is other people teaching your kids while you're homeschooling. I think that parents think they have to know it all, and maybe in elementary grades you can figure it out, although the math is still but I think if you are interested in seeking out other people to help your kids and teach them a little bit here and there, if you have a homeschool support group and you trade things off. I used to always teach cooking and crafts because I liked those two things, but I started out teaching Spanish, and a lot of people don't know pronunciation. They don't. I'm not a fluent speaker or anything, but I've taken many years of Spanish, and I've spoken and worked with people who do speak Spanish. And I was able to homeschool a friend's daughter who was wanting to learn high school Spanish. And in North Carolina colleges, universities, you do need 2 years of a language. So I was able to do that for her. It's a fine line. You have to kind of be careful about this because you have to be able to trust somebody else with your child. But there are some really great benefits to getting other people involved in the education of your children, especially as they get a little bit older. And that's just something that I didn't know about at all when we first started homeschooling elementary kids, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Was that the only thing you thought of that you would like to bring up that we haven't talked about?
I think so, but you know what happens 2 days later, I'll say, oh, by the way, Christine. I think that's it.
Okay, all right. So one of the last questions I ask parents who have homeschooled their kids is that if you could go backwards and visit your just starting out self, what would you tell her?
You're gonna be okay. Just do it. You're gonna end up being so happy you did. It's just starting is so hard. Sometimes for a lot of people, I think just start. Just push the start button. Bring your children home and enjoy them.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dawn. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. We do have quite a bit in common, and I enjoyed watching you dig around in the memory box in your mind and pulling out things to.
It's very deep in there.
Oh.
I have a lot of years between when we finished homeschooling and today.
But it's still experience that, the young homeschooling families now will just find so very valuable. So thank you for your time, your honesty, and just being so generous with your experience.